This dinosaur was never supposed to happen. What do you mean you don't believe me? Well, here's the lead developer of the Isle saying it himself.
I plan to play everything, but there are some that just seem less appealing, like the peacock that farts on you. Like, I don't know if I ever want to play that guy.
That's the thing. A lot of dinosaurs like that one. It was, at least to me, it wasn't going to have it wasn't even going to have a life cycle. It was originally just going to be an NPC. And then I was like, all right, we can let people temporarily play with it. And then everyone's like, give it a life cycle, make it a real animal. And we could. So we did. Now it's a thing.
Obviously, I'm just being hyperbolic, but you get the gist of it. What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Kingfisher, and today we're going to be talking about a very special little critter, Hypsilophodon, otherwise known as the smallest playable on the entire roster. Like you just heard, Hypsi was originally going to be strictly an NPC. It was just going to be an AI existing in the world of the Isle. However, after having heard feedback from the community, who very much wanted it to be a fully fledged playable, the developers happened to have the resources and the ability to grant that wish. This would happen again many years later when they proceeded to give it a proper growth cycle, presumably due to the addition of the mutation system, but according to Dondi, also because of community feedback. So don't ever say the devs don't listen to us, you bunch of fucking... And so now we have Hypsi as we know and love him, the stomach bile spitting troll that makes every player stop what they're doing as soon as they hear its call. Juggle all of that precisely. I don't know. A Hypsi?
That is
What?
exciting.
I had to stop.
It is,
that
you
just,
don't
like-
hear Hypsies nowadays, so...
Now, if you play the Isle at all, which, you know, why else would you be here if you don't, then you would know that Hypsies tend to be an exceptionally rare sight due to its lack of a player base. Sure, there are incredibly handsome, intelligent-based people who play Hypsi on occasion, such as myself, but its flaws are undeniable. In a game where player interaction is the most engaging aspect of the experience, taking an animal and making it so that it can't really have said interactions in ways that are meaningful to both parties will lead to the last thing that you want to feel when playing a video game. Boredom. The fundamental issue with Hypsi and several other small tiers on the roster are how its size inherently limits its value in the ecosystem. It isn't worth hunting for most hungry carnivores, as they literally will not provide any food value substantial enough to be worth the effort, nor do they pose any legitimate threat to anything beyond a brief annoyance in the form of its blinding spit. This in turn puts animals like Hypsi in an awkward position, because while their worth as a playable character is about as high as battery acid is good for you, they can be quite fun for some players. Some of the best and most memorable play sessions that I've personally had on Evrima are as smaller animals, either running around as a dryo juking predators like my name is LeBron, boo 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 boo, hear me? Hit the rollie, start with the rollie on. Or establishing a quote-unquote base at some pond as a baby and defending it from larger creatures. So how can we squeeze as much potential out of Hypsilophodon as possible? Bam! We make it a carpenter. More specifically, we give it the behavior of the humble sociable weaver, but just on a much bigger scale. Thank you once again to 22 Crafting Tables for cooking up this incredible piece of concept art. If you guys haven't already, show the homeboy some love by following his TikTok in the description. But anyway, this concept art is pretty straightforward, and the funny part is it isn't completely unsubstantiated either. 22 and I hatched this idea together after Kissin replied to someone in the Isle's official Discord suggesting they will be attempting to include some form of building into Hypsi's overall kit. Now, personally, climbing would have already been cool enough, but I will be 6 feet dead in the dirt before you hear me complain of adding more features to a dinosaur's kit. This is the part of the video where I mention that this is simply a concept discussion. Nothing about this is final or coming to the game. We are just here to have a good time, like always. But like I said before, the concept art is pretty straightforward, and in order to make this video worth watching, I'm gonna explain a little more in depth. Right off the bat, the existence of a permanent structure can be seen as a bit questionable. After all, it somewhat contradicts Evrima's design philosophy in terms of moving players around. Migration zones exist for a reason. They're a way to cycle players through the map to increase interactivity and, well, keep players from camping in one spot, which is exactly what this nest would cause. And one would be right to call this a problem. That is, if the animal actually had any value. If this were a Tyrannosaurus, or hell, even an animal as small as Omni, staying put in one place for an extended period of time would be a glaring issue. However, because the creature in question is, as I've already discussed, pretty worthless in terms of tangible value to the ecosystem, this art is how I'd like to give it the importance it very desperately needs, as no creature, big or small, should be left out of the overall loop. The first and most important form of value comes in the form of reinforced sticks and wood. If you watched my small tiers video, then you may already be familiar with this idea, but if you didn't, then I'll catch you up to speed, schmookums. Essentially, as Hypsilophodon moves through the treetops, they have a random chance at causing stronger branches to fall down onto the forest floor, becoming available for herbivores and carnivores alike to use for nesting purposes. This reinforced nesting debris would increase the time it would take for egg temperatures to drop, and decrease incubation time for each egg depending on how much is used when building a nest. This would effectively make nesting far less of a hassle for other players and, oh, I don't know, possibly encourage them to actually do it. There could also be the potential for Hypsi to cause a special, highly nutritious fruit to drop from the trees that herbivores would be able to eat, providing them a higher diet and nutrient percentage than regular food. Now, I need you to keep in mind this would all occur at random, and Hypsi would have no way of purposefully causing this to happen unless they run back and forth along the same tree line. This would not only be a waste of time for the Hypsi, as it would not be able to use the reinforced sticks or eat the fruit for itself, but it would also drain its stamina bar pretty quickly. So that's the first half of the concept art, and I think that this alone allows the Hypsi to affect the environment around it passively pretty well, providing a direct worth to other players who happen to be nearby, which scales up through the food chain. But what about the structures? This is the second form of value that Hypsi would create. However, whereas the previous example was something that players could tangibly use, this one leans more in the direction of aesthetics and environmental design. I don't know if you've noticed this while playing the game, but Gateway often feels much more empty than it should. And I'm not talking about a lack of players. There is no wildlife outside from the few AI that currently exists. While I understand that the devs are cooking up some smaller AIs to take up some more space, I'm not only referring to consumables. I'm talking about pockets of insects that may spring from the grass when disturbed, flocks of birds flying back and forth through open clearings in distinct patterns, even the occasional lizard basking on a rock, things that are of little or no value to the player diet-wise, but instead atmospherically. Having colonies of Hypsilophodon building these structures would almost certainly add to that much-needed feeling. I imagine the building system itself to function using modules in which the Hypsi can place a phantom version of what it would like to construct to an attachment point, be it some sort of basket, a ramp, a platform, what have you, and be able to connect them. It would take a lot of work, yes, but maintenance is kind of the point when building a nest for your group. Materials included in this construction process would be special bundles of straw that only Hypsi could use, and as the quote-unquote base is constructed, something very interesting would begin to happen. See, as the Hypsi gathers this specific straw, it would accidentally pick up seeds that lie within the bundles, which would then drop to the base of the tree when put in place. Now, this is a little more thematic and wouldn't actually require some sort of animation or anything. With time, bushes would begin to sprout out from the basis of the tree that the structure is built upon, as well as some higher parts of the base itself, such as vines coming down from platforms that the larger herbivores could potentially consume. As these plants reach maturity following a certain period of time, I would say maybe 15 to 20 minutes, a special fruit would sprout from the shrubs that would essentially act as the quote-unquote adult version of the sanctuary mushroom, a valuable but limited food item that would give a percentage of all 3 diets to whoever eats it. This would make Hypsi itself a literal resource to the herbivores, and much like Homalocephaly in my small tiers video, would only be a benefit to the animals around it, as it will be a small tier capable of creating and maintaining its own pocket of ecology. And speaking of maintenance, these structures would indeed have to be kept in a certain condition to prevent them from falling apart and despawning. This could be done by having to bring leaves or more bundles of straw and sticks every 30 minutes or so by any member of the colony. Once the structure is abandoned, whether it be because the Hypsi logged out, it got killed, whatever, it will succumb to the elements in about half an hour, leaving behind an extra big bundle of the reinforced wood that I mentioned before at the base of the tree, waiting for one lucky dinosaur to stumble across, perhaps even encouraging them to actually get freaky and nest, if possible. If you want to get really crazy with it, it could even potentially create a miniature nesting zone stretching out from the base of the tree due to the presence of this sudden bed of straw. This mini zone would have similar effects to the nesting zones found on Isla Spiro, which we will hopefully be receiving in Gateway very soon. As for the value the structures themselves would have for Hypsi, it provides a safe place for them to nest and a haven from predators, with the only exception being Herrera and Pteranodon. While Herrera would be able to traverse the structures, it would not be able to enter the baskets or nests unless it dedicates the energy to start destroying them, in which case the Hypsis would need to defend themselves, flee, or annoy the Hera enough with their spit so that it'll give up and look for food somewhere else. And speaking of spit, shout out to Bird for showing me this when he did. Apparently Punch Packet once mentioned the idea of giving Hypsi different spit effects depending on what they eat. So, you know, let's try and bring that back, huh? Like harsher fruits that exist in highlands could give it a more acidic effect. Maybe eating peppers will cause the bile to be heavier in capsaicin, effectively acting as like a biological pepper spray that keeps an attacker blind for an extended period of time. But let's slow down a little bit and more or less walk through an example of this life cycle so you can get get an even better idea of what it is we're suggesting. You spawn in as a hypsi and you do the usual survival shtick. You find mushrooms in the sanctuary, head to a migration zone, you spend some time clowning around in the treetops, things of that nature. If you're smart, you'll be fully grown in less than an hour, and it's at this point that you would get to work. You head to the nearest migration zone as soon as you're able to begin building in order to find some of that prime real estate in the form of a big-ass tree. This will be especially cool to do when the redwoods come in. Once discovered, you'd begin building all the ramps, platforms, and a nest to your liking. Pretty quickly, you realize that building on your own is pretty time-consuming. Lucky for you, another pair of hypsies has come along and they want to group up, and this makes the process much easier as you have several individuals contributing to the structure. As you're about to finish, you're ambushed by an adult Herrerasaurus, but thankfully he misses the first pounce, and it gives you and your friends an opportunity to climb into the structure and snipe the Hera with your spit, annoying it enough to the point where it has no choice but to look for an easier meal elsewhere. Crisis averted, for now. So you all settle down for good as the migration zone continues to bring more herbivores to your location. Pretty soon, bushes begin to sprout from the base of the tree, a product of the seeds that were inadvertently planted by you during construction. After about 40 minutes of growth, fruits would begin to sprout from these bushes and vines would clamber down from the platforms above, providing all three diets for larger herbivores in the area. After around a little more time, the migration zone has switched, and herbivores begin to move out of the area, and your Hypsi clan is left completely alone and vulnerable. Just then, a group of pteranodons descends from the base, and you find that they're very difficult to aim at using your spit, so you are unable to keep them at bay. You and your group retreat, abandoning the structure and leaving it to the world at large. After about 20 to 30 minutes of no upkeep, the straw falls apart and onto the ground, creating a straw bed of around 30 to 40 feet in diameter around the tree, creating a mini nesting ground for groups of both carnivores and herbivores alike. If left unused, this straw will return to the earth and despawn after about 20 minutes. Normally, having this many abilities for a single playable would seem like overkill, but I need to stress that when the playable is as inconsequential as Hypsi currently is in the state of the game, the best course of action is to simply make it fun to play. When community servers receive much more customization and micro ecosystem servers are created, I'm sure Hypsi will be much more popular. But until then, I'd like to think that these ideas would be something to consider. But what are your thoughts? Am I goated for this? Am I a stupid dumb idiot? And who is this dark figure that I keep seeing in the corner of my room? As always, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and thank you guys so much for watching today's video. It means the absolute world. I don't say this enough, but it means the absolute world to me that you guys take time out of your day to consume my carefully curated slop. I truly never thought that I would have a fan base of this size, and the fact that it keeps on growing day by day. I'm infinitely grateful, and thank you so much. That being said, like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
If illegal immigrants want to stay here, have them hunt down child predators and call the program Aliens vs. Predators.